It's about that time where I stop talking about the psychology of relationships and start talking about philosophy and political science. Avatar: The Last Airbender contemplates what are the responsibilities of those in power. The Avatar has authority not only because of the combination of the four elements in one person, but also because of the spiritual and political power they hold. One does not think of Avatar as a superhero work, largely because it takes place in a high fantasy world. Oh, quick note, for those who don't know, high fantasy is a world that's completely apart from our own. Think of The Lord of the Rings instead of Harry Potter. But Avatar kind of inherits a lot of the ideas of superhero films and other superhero media. You have a hierarchy of power, and the Avatar is at the top. As the most famous line from a superhero movie goes, with great power comes great responsibility. But responsibility to do what, exactly, and how? It's commonly accepted in modern societies that the ends do not justify violent means, and I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. But what if one has the choice between preserving oppressive hierarchies and violently destroying them? What should one do? The show provides a lot of different answers to those questions through its different avatars. And I find it far more interesting than the question I hear too often about, hey, what if the Avatar was evil? The whole idea that, hey, if people had superhero-like power in the real world, they wouldn't use it morally, was an interesting idea back in the 1980s when Alan Moore explored it with Watchmen, but these days it's kind of become threadbare. Not saying interesting things can't still be done with it, but in its most basic form, it reads a little like a overly arrogant college freshman proud of what they learned in ethics class. Also, while, yes, I believe there could be an evil Avatar, it is significantly less likely than your average superhero being villainous. As Iroh explains to Zuko in episode 209, Bitter Work, the strength of the Avatar comes from understanding that the boundaries between the four elements, and indeed the four nations, are nothing but illusions, and that one must learn about every element and every nation in order to attain true wisdom. The strength of the Avatar, thus, is not just about physical strength, but about spiritual knowledge and multiculturalism. Obviously, one can be evil and have these traits, but it's less likely. But what's interesting to me is what responsibilities the Avatar has. There are a grand total of 7 avatars whom the show analyzes in depth. Those being Aang, Korra, Roku, Kyoshi, Kuruk, Yang Chen, and Wan. But this video is short, so for now I will only focus on the 2 avatars with the most obviously opposing personalities, those being Aang and Kyoshi. One is an Airbender, while the other is an Earthbender. Of course they would be opposites. He is peaceful and restrained, while she is stern and vengeful. But it goes deeper than this. Air is the element of freedom, while Earth is the element of substance. Now, why does this matter philosophically? As I discussed on my long ago video about the philosophy of airbending, that style of bending and that element is about achieving enlightenment through detachment. This does not necessarily mean airbenders need to live apart from the world, as Tenzin and the New Air Nation demonstrate after the end of Season 3, wherein they do the Avatar's work, while she can't, by flying around the world to restore balance. near the end of The Legend of Korra. But it does mean that Airbending focuses more on spirituality and philosophy, while Earthbending focuses more on the world. It's the difference between abstract contemplation and hard-nosed pragmatism. Kyoshi first appears in person in episode 205, Avatar Day, when Aang invokes her in order to defend himself against an absurd kangaroo court. The mayor's case that Kyoshi killed the town's so-called brave leader in the past is ludicrous. But in a shocking and fascinating twist, it turns out that Kyoshi did in fact kill Qin the Conqueror because he was a tyrant. There was no peaceful way she could find to deal with him, so she used force. Now, it is worth noting that this is not the same sort of pugnacious naivete that powers Season 1 Korra. This is cold and calculating. She determined that only violent means could bring about the end of tyranny, so she exercised those means. And this ended up succeeding. A lot of people in the Avatar community have this idea of Kyoshi as this bloodthirsty killer, but from what we see about her in the Kyoshi novels, we know that this is not quite true. She's just been embittered by misfortune. If she does not take what she wants, it's not going to be given to her. She has learned this through experience. When Kyoshi speaks again with Aang in the middle of episode 320, The Old Masters, the difference in their ideologies is stark. I don't just mean pacifism versus militarism, but also utilitarianism versus Kantian deontology. Utilitarianism has been misinterpreted by a lot of people, but in its most basic sense, it only means that actions are defined by their consequences rather than by the immorality or morality of the action itself. Whereas Kant believed that the morality of actions were independent of their effects. Aang, using the creativity that defines airbenders, looks for a loophole in studying Kyoshi's actions. She didn't technically kill Qin, he argues. Rather, he fell to his death because of his own stubbornness. This is the same attitude he takes toward the bully in episode 302, the headband. Fighting the bully is wrong, but he's not fighting him because he's not throwing any blows, even though the bully is the one who ends up on his butt. Instead of fighting, Aang just moves out of the way and lets the bully hurt himself. He believes in Kantian convictions. Killing is wrong, he believes, so he shouldn't kill the Fire Lord, even though doing so would arguably benefit the world. If Aang had been in Kyoshi's position, he would have justified his actions by saying that he didn't really kill Qin. But to Kyoshi, this doesn't matter. For Kyoshi, this is just a fool's game. As Toph says in episode 209, Bitter Work, being an earthbender is about not relying on tricks, not relying on clever solutions. Determined, the earthbender stands their ground and does what is best for them and those they care about. Somewhat independent of broader ideological considerations, Kyoshi outright claims that though she might not have killed Qin, she would have been willing to do so in order to stop the spread of tyranny. As she says to Aang, only justice can bring peace. Now, Aang would not necessarily disagree with that in of itself, but the real question is, what is justice? Obviously, Kyoshi has a much different idea of what that word means than Aang. So, who's right, according to the show? Well, it depends on the situation. Avatar as a show validates Aang's perspective, but it does not invalidate Kyoshi's. One must investigate their consciousness and the situation as a whole before deciding how to act. There's not one right answer. This is what Avatar Korra learns on the much maligned second season of her show. She spends so much of that season trying to discover what the Avatar should do. She thinks it's just this lesson that she needs to learn, but by the end of the season, she learns that there's no one right Avatar way to handle the problem. Rather, an Avatar has the responsibility to study the situation, study their own values, study the result they want to achieve, and make their own decisions on what is right. There is room for ideological and philosophical diversity. Write down in the comments if you side with Aang or Kyoshi, but know that the show does not side against either. It does not invalidate either of their approaches. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's a brilliant show that's finally getting the attention it deserves. And I love the show's ideological flexibility. That doesn't mean it's completely free of ideals, but it has very little use for the kind of broad ideological machinations that don't have to deal with the actual realities of the situation on the ground. This is a show about being adaptable, above all, about trying to study the situation and come up with your own solutions. And I think that's a really interesting idea. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.